I'm Juan Sanchez, and the lights just went out. Sorry. I'm a second-year graduate student in the biophysics program here at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm in Elizabeth Wright's lab. And just being a Latino male, I think I just see very few of us in the field from my experience so far. And I really appreciate, environments like this. And I think what really drew me to having conversation with Louisa was just my first experience at M&M and attending the Lens On different sessions. Really like showed me that there was a community that was interested in just including all of us in this discussion. So I feel very privileged to be at this spot and taking time to speak with everyone today.
Thanks, Juan. Dr. Brown?
Hey everyone, so I am Dr. Treva Brown. I am a physical scientist at the United States Naval Research Laboratory. I always joke and I tell people that I am in Mississippi, not DC, like everybody mistakenly thinks I am, but we are one cohort, but yeah, so I'm deep down in the South, which probably explains my personality. So I am also honored and humbled to be the committee chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, which is newly minted by Esther, and I am just glad to be involved with that, and I'm glad to have some of you all who are here on the call today just be a part of that with me. So we're definitely going to see a lot of things moving and shaking and changing, and I'm going to give it back over to Louisa because I could talk all day.
Thanks, Dr. Brown. Dr. Celio?
Hi, I'm Dr. Gail Celio. I'm the electron microscopy section lead at the University Imaging Centers at the University of Minnesota. I primarily work with biological samples, preparing them for electron microscopy, taking pictures, training people, etc. I'm also very flattered and humbled to be a part of this. Let's see, to describe myself, I am a white woman with long brunette hair. I'm wearing glasses and I have a purple cardigan and pink t-shirt on and a cartoonish background for my Zoom. But I'm definitely looking forward to discussing more diversity, equity, accessibility topics that MSA can approach. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Celio. Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Hi there. My name is James Fitzpatrick. I'm a professor at Washington University School of Medicine in the departments of cell biology and neuroscience. I also am the director of an institutional imaging technology research and development center. I've been a part of MSA for a while. I'm currently a council member, director of biological sciences. So my views on diversity. So probably like Treva, I could talk about this forever because it's a topic that's close to my heart. I would say that, my views on diversity have really been shaped by my experiences over my career, some of which have been pretty negative. I've seen people be discriminated against, whether it be on race, gender, and sexual orientation. And so when I sort of got to the position of having my own group and really being able to shape it as I saw fit, one of the overriding principles that sort of guided me and still guides me to this day is really the principle of trying to recruit as a diverse team of people as possible, and whether that be gender diverse, whether that be diversity in sexual orientation, whether that be cultural diversity, but really to try and build a team that brings together a really sort of broad set of viewpoints that we can all learn from and grow from.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fitzpatrick. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Kelly.
I had to make her a co-host. You should be good to unmute now.
Okay, fine. I thought you were trying to sanction my words here. I was about to make a complaint if you're trying to censure me. So thanks so much for the invitation. It's lovely to see everyone here. I'm Deb Kelly. I'm a professor here at Penn State University, and we work at the interface between life sciences and materials research, working on different things involving cancer or viruses. And it's really a pleasure to be the president-elect of MSA, following the footsteps of Esther and Peter Crozier and all who have come before me. And as we all know, diversity is the key to survival in life on Earth. Nothing really changes and evolves without diversity being integrated into who we are, into our genome, and into the ways in which we structure survival. So it's really a pleasure to see the life and growth of the diversity movement in MSA, and I'm happy to contribute to that and help spur it along in whatever way I can as president-elect or as president next year of the society, as we all try to get back to a more normal approach here. So if there's anything I can do, I'm happy to step in and help out. And today I'm here to listen and see what you all have to say and support you in whatever measure I can. So thanks very much. And you're allowed to mute me again if you wish.
Thank you all so much. And Dr. Kelly, I love how you put that, that diversity is the key to survival. So what was our motivation for this webinar? Well, there was I don't know if any of you have seen, there was an article recently published in Financial Times about the promises many corporations and institutions made last year following George Floyd's murder. But many have fallen short of meeting their own set goals. And the article didn't lend to why, but whatever the reason, we don't want to just pledge change. We want to find ways to impose actual change. And MSA took that step itself by, like Dr. Brown said, establishing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. So this webinar serves two purposes. One is we want to hear from our students directly on what we can do better as a society. And in addition to that, we also want to help you better equip yourselves to handle situations that may arise as students at your respective institutions. But before we jump in, I would like to hear from the task force members. I'm one, I'm a member, but we have Drs. Brown, Celio, and Kelly, who are also members. If you could, I'll let Dr. Brown lead the way since she's leading the task force, but if you could tell us what the goal of this task force is, what our purpose is, and what we have accomplished so far.
Definitely. So as we've stated before, we now have a newly formed Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And also, as Louisa stated, this was formed as a sort of response to a lot of questions, comments, and concerns that were being heard at the meeting. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got involved and I guess how I'm like the ringleader of all of this. So I am fairly new still to MSA, even though I feel like I've been here forever just because of the friends and comrades that I've made along my journey. But I mentioned to a member that I didn't see anybody that looked like me. So kind of like Juan was saying, like I didn't see any faces that looked like me. I saw the women, a few women, not as many women as I would like to see, but I saw no one that had my shade whatsoever. So I didn't say it in a negative or derogatory manner. It was just simply a mere observation. And like literally from that comment and observation, I got members from the executive committee that were like, okay, yeah, we never really saw it that way, right? And they asked me for my opinion. And from my opinion, they asked other people their opinion and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of how everything got started. That's how the ball got rolling. Now, as the task force, our purpose is to hear you. And I'll put it as simple as that. We are trying to hear you and we are trying to respond to those things that you are trying to tell us. So what we've done so far, we've gotten a lot rolling in terms of inclusion, making sure that we are not excluding any particular group, getting things put in place that you'll actually see in the upcoming meeting. So you'll, you'll see a few things changing there. And one of those biggest things being the lens on diversity series that was a big hit last year. So we are hoping to bring those back because I'm a firm believer that talking about it is one thing, but actually taking it into action and doing something about it is the other thing. So we can't help you unless you help us. And that means creating safe spaces for you all to come to us and say, hey, we want to see this. We want to see more, in terms of, those of us who have disabilities. We want to see more in terms of us who identify with the LGBTQIA community, like things like that. So, so that's what we're here for, non-judgmental, safe space, open. We want to see progress and we want to take everyone's concerns to heart. And we don't want to have anyone left on the back burner saying, are they like really listening to us? Are we really being progressive? Are we really doing stuff? So we want to be that group that is like, yes, we are doing it for you and we are here for you. So I will now turn it over to either one of my other committee members.
Dr. Stelio or Kelly, if there's anything either of you wanted to add, please feel free.
Yeah, I can speak if you'd like. I really hate when people say I don't see race, because if you don't see it, you don't acknowledge it's a problem, right? Or they're like, oh, I don't see gender. Really? Because I do. And like Travis said, when you show up and you see people that don't look like you just tend to notice that. And you might feel like you're an outcast or shy to interact or something like that. But if you see people that look like you, it's almost like you gravitate toward them, and that goes at every rank of being a student all the way through being a professor. So when you come to NNM, we want to have a welcome, opening environment, and we want you to be able to see people that look like you. We want you to be able to see people who express their gender in non-binary ways, or people who have diverse hair color, or just anything that's not considered like typical or normal, or an older white adult that just dominates the meeting or something. We want to be more multicultural, but also diverse, and we want to be able to see those things. If you don't see it, you don't notice it and bring forth change. So I think just being aware now and noticing things and bringing them to the level of the leadership. And it's really interesting. I was on the Executive Council leadership call. I think there was only one male the other day on the call, and that was Peter. I was like, oh, I seem to think we're making progress here, and I want to see those changes continue. So I think the new diversity task force is a great way to enact that change and to notice. And I know that Treva and others are leading. We're going to get our first statistics this year to try and understand where the deficiencies are as opportunities for improvement, to put numbers behind it so that we can try to reach out and increase these. And one thing that I'm doing is to reach out to go to other conferences of other diverse settings in engineering. I'm going to go to OSTEM in Atlanta, and I'm going to go to other conferences and try and attract students or other PIs into M&M, anyone working with microscopy, to try and help improve this and improve throughout the ranks here. And I think seeing things and noticing them is the first priority, and then enacting opportunities to improvement. And then when you see the change, you're like, oh, we helped create that. And that's really from the base up, the way to get started. I'm really proud to be a part of this initiative now that was put forth during Esther's leadership.
Dr. Stelio? Okay. Okay, so before we hear from the students, I want to preface this by saying that these are inherently difficult discussions, as we all know. But my personal opinion is that they can't be productive unless we're open to all questions, keeping in mind that some may just come from ignorance and not malice. In fact, if you ask my fellow task force members, they'll tell you that I've asked some uncomfortable questions and maybe goofy ones, but I was also met with kindness and understanding. And that's the energy I'd like us to keep here, that we're all here to learn from each other and seek understanding. No one's trying to win a debate because that's not the purpose here. We're going to keep with Planet Fitness's mantra of the judgment-free zone, like Dr. Brown mentioned earlier. So in that, please ask or say whatever is on your mind. We're going to go by the practice of raising your hand. So if any student has something they'd like to say, please raise your hand. We'll call on you. If you feel more comfortable being anonymous, you can private message either Aubrey or Yingji. Aubrey is our president, student council president-elect, and Yingji is chair of our education outreach committee. Where is Yingji? Oh, there she is. Okay, she's listening. Okay, so I'll start everyone with the first question to the panelists. If you personally have never experienced discrimination based on your race, gender, sexual orientation, or ability, why do you think it's important to advocate for those who have? And James, I know you kind of hinted towards this during your introduction, that you fall, at least in terms of appearance, under the majority, those in power. But you said it meant a lot to you to have a diverse team. So I'll start with you.
Thank you. So I do look like the majority, with the exception that I've lost most of my hair, and I blame academia for that. So you'll have all of you have that to look forward to. I kid, really. Yeah, so I had a number of negative experiences. So I'll preface, when I was in graduate school in England, like, I had the most wonderful time, right? I worked in this laser spectroscopy and dynamics group at the University of Bristol. It was an incredibly diverse work group. We had students from sort of the Asia Pacific region, sort of China, Taiwan. We had people from Singapore. We had people from Australia. We had people students from across all of the UK and Europe. And we also had postdocs from America. And so it was an incredibly sort of diverse team. It was 3 or 4 PIs, and we all shared like a big group office, and they were all co-joined labs, and it was incredibly collaborative. And so that kind of shaped my desire to go into science, because I had such, an incredibly positive experience in my graduate studies. And it was just like super fun. So then I decided to come to America and to do a postdoc. And that's when, kind of my eyes were opened to, at the time, I didn't really fully understand or appreciate the individuals were being actively discriminated against. I'm the first to admit, right, looking back with hindsight, that I participated in, at the prime age of like 22, participated in a culture of silence. And this is, 20 years ago now. As I sort of progressed in my career, and I spent, before my position here, I spent almost a decade in California. And it was my time in California that really sort of opened my eyes to, how people should be treated. And that was also the time when I sort of started hiring people. And I didn't want to see anything like that happen on my watch, right? I didn't want to participate in this culture of silence. I didn't want to see people, discriminated against or not promoted because of their color or because of their, demographic background, because they were a member of the LGBTQIA community. I mean, to me, that just, it stinks, right? And it really, it's just from a personal perspective, it really ate at me inside. And I didn't want to participate in that culture, and I didn't want to subject anyone to that kind of discrimination. So I made sort of the personal choice that, even if it made me unpopular, I was going to, open my mouth and be loud and stick up for people and stick up for myself. I'm still not too good about sticking up for myself, but I am pretty loud about sticking up for other things. And I just feel that everyone, right, needs to be treated with dignity and respect. And it doesn't happen, right, a lot. And I see this a lot in science. And so, I'm resolved to, opening my big mouth and saying something about it and making sure that people understand that, the way you behave is important and the way you treat people is important. And to me, that's just really personally very important.
Thank you. I can appreciate that. I'll open it to any of the panelists to respond if you have a comment. Oh, okay. It looks like a tie on the hand raise. I'll go, I'll go with Dr. Celio.
Thank you. I know we got this question in advance, and when I read it, like the inner 8-year-old in me said, well, because it's fair. You just, it's got to be fair. It's not fair of these people if there's differences and stuff, if people are being treated differently. And also, part of it comes back to something that that Treva has said more than once. You can't be it if you can't see it. And one thing that specifically with MSA, one of the things that I was looking at when we were with the programs and trying to figure out who to invite for speakers. Not that I'm on a programming committee by any means, but in looking at past speakers that have been invited, I remember at one point trying to find out when the last time a woman was one of the plenary speakers, and it was not including 2020 because we had one then, but the one before that was, I believe, 2012. And that didn't sit well with me. And so I think having, and I couldn't tell you the, if and when MSA has had a woman of color as a plenary speaker. And so I think the choices this year are great. So I think, again, having more diverse people in visible positions is very important to the current community and the future community.
It would be so easy if we could just tell everyone to just play nice, just be fair. I wanna put Juan on the spot here, and he was November's student spotlight. If you guys if you guys get the MSA update, there's a student highlighted every month for their achievements. So during our conversation, just casually, Juan brought up that how he came to research, academic research, and it struck me, if you remember that, well, of course you remember that story, Juan. If you could retell it, please. It's right in line with what Drs. Fitzpatrick and Celio said about representation. So Juan, you've got the floor.
Yeah, of course. So Luis and I were talking and just about kind of my undergraduate experience, and there was nothing horrific that happened. It was just, you know, I coming from immigrant parents, right? I really didn't know, how much science there was to learn, the different fields, all these things. So coming through my undergrad, my parents, their ideas was, get your degree and then that'll set you up for a great job afterwards, right? That's what I was told and told again growing up. And so that's what I did. And when I graduated, I felt very lost and confused as to what were the next steps, what I was going to do. And that's because I realize now that I didn't have that guidance or mentorship from people in these different fields that I could have possibly gone into. And that was just because I found it difficult to connect with anyone there. It was I was a student. They were my teachers, my professors. I needed to get good grades and graduate. There was kind of this mentality. And so, after I graduated, I moved from Virginia out to Chicago. And at Chicago, I worked at a community college. And I worked at a biology lab there, kind of helping with some of the instructions and, some of the basic science there. And there was a great chair, and she was a Mexican-American woman. And that was the first time where I felt like I could actually just speak openly with someone. And I always remember this one conversation I had with her where she kept telling me that, this isn't it for you. Like, not that where I was working was a terrible place. It was a great environment. She just told me that there was more for me out there. And I just didn't know how to get there. So, she encouraged me really to seek my master's degree and, become and take opportunities, that they came to me because, I felt for a while that I was just maybe possibly inadequate at being able to do certain things just because I didn't get that extra push. And so having that conversation with her, kind of led me down this road where I had a great experience in my master's degree. And she really helped me, make sure I could make time to go to the lab and do research and then also come back to work. Just because, I had family responsibilities at the time as well. But what I wanted to say was that finally having that experience and being able to openly talk with someone about, just things that I felt like I couldn't talk to other people about and getting that encouragement really shaped and helped me get to the point where I am now. Something that I honestly never thought would happen. So I think having seeing someone in a position like that, she was the chair of a department. She was a Mexican-American woman. Like I said, not that anyone has, belittled me or anything, but being able to have just a conversation on the same level with someone and seeing, how responsive she was to our discussion, really helped propel me forward.
Thank you, Juan. Dr. Brown, I skipped over you. You had something to say in response to this question.
So actually, it was one story was kind of a good tie-in to what I was going to say because I was going to preface my comment / response as this might be a topic changer on what I had to say. So kind of in reference to the question that you already posed. So, of course, I have been kind of not too much on the negative side of discrimination, but of course, I've had oh, you can't do that because you're a girl, or oh, that's not for you, or this is that and the other. So kind of piggybacking now off of what Juan was saying. So for me, I didn't know what I was going to do once I graduated high school. Like, just like my mom and dad were like, hey, you just need to go to school, get your degree, because you don't want to work hard like your parents. And I was like, you're right. I don't want to work hard like y'all. So that's all I knew. I didn't know anything about STEM. I didn't know anything about research. I didn't even know what a PhD stood for. And when my physics teacher in high school was just like, you need to go into STEM disciplines, I'm like, what I'm gonna be studying about stems of plants? So I digress. So that was me. That was the extent of what I had the knowledge of, right? So it took others to definitely mold and shape me into the Dr. Brown that you see today. And I'm still growing. You know, I definitely pride myself on being unique to me, meaning that I like being bold in everything that I do, meaning my clothes, my nails, my hair. I am the epitome of a girly girl, okay? And you don't find that in science a lot, okay? So I'm just like, this is me. But with that, I was always criticized about that too in school. I had a professor that was like, well, if you didn't spend time so much on your looks, maybe you would get your books. And it's like, wait a minute. That's not the reason why I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it because I don't have help. And I also had a teacher, I couldn't pass physics. So those physics people on here, I don't know how y'all do it, but anyway, that's another digression. But I couldn't pass physics, and I had an advisor that is supposed to be there to help you through your journey. An advisor say, well, you will never graduate from this institution in chemistry. And they had 3 other degree audits laid out from me. They had just already dismissed me without even giving me the help, right? So I dealt with things like that. So I could have let it just deter me and detour me and reroute what I had planned. But herein comes, like Juan was saying, someone to say, no, you got this. So I like to use the mirror analogy. It took someone to hold up a mirror in front of me and say, you got this, you can do this. What is it that you set out to do? And you came here because you wanted to do chemistry. So you're going to graduate in chemistry. So it took someone to remind me of what my goals and my, ideals were. And I also had to remember not to lose myself, because so many people were like, oh, you might need to calm down your nails, wear you some blush and cotton candy on your nails, and, straighten out your hair. And I did that. And I was so just, like I felt how I felt like I looked. So I always encourage people to, you do you, boo, as I normally say, but do you, and don't let anybody else say that. But I also wanted to say too, these talks are important because, I could have let all of that just get into my mental and my mindset and just hold me back. But in having people, just like the people that you have here on the call today, having them to be able to vent to help, to steer in the right direction, that's how I was able to navigate. And so also to those who are still in school, you have your professors like, Professor Kelly, Professor Fitzpatrick, like all of these people are here to help you. And those are the people that you really want to pick out and identify with, even if they're not your actual research advisor or whomever. If you know that these people are progressive and seeing and wanting change, those are the people that you want to have lead you and guide you through wherever you are right now, be if you're an early career professional like myself, or if you're still navigating your educational career. So, I wanted to put all that together to say, like, having all of those people tell me in the past, like, oh, maybe if you look like this, maybe if you did that instead of this. Also a caveat of that, I minored in dance. People was like, people that major in chemistry don't minor in dance. I was like, it's okay, I'm gonna do it. But anyway, so having people tell you things like that, it's like, I could have easily been like, you know what, they may be right, but it took others that look like me, having a female undergraduate research advisor, having a scholarship advisor who was African-American. He was a male, but African-American. So being able to identify with those people definitely helped me to continue on the path to get to where I am. But also in hindsight, and we might get into imposter syndrome, because I know I definitely still suffer from it. When I came to be called for my current position, I was like, I'm I'm not good enough for that. Y'all don't mean that y'all want me. I'm just a little girl from North Baton Rouge. That's not me. But I had all of these different voices in my head that had previously been told me, you're not good enough. You can't do it. You won't ever be able to do chemistry. You won't be able to do that. I psyched myself up to the point where I was like, I got my PhD, but I'm not good enough for this. But I was, and I am. I'm still doing it, right? But you know, just if you're going through it, and I'll wrap up because Louisa knows I could talk all day. If you are going through any kind of discrimination, I am not going to talk on what to do to battle it, because other people may talk a little bit better than I can about it. But don't let that bring your psyche down. Like, this is why we're here. We are here for you to let it all out and let us help guide you through that. And then we want to be that change that we want to see. Girl, like I already said, that's my motto. We want to be that change that we want to see, and we want to also have you be that change that you want to see. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox now.
I'm so glad you said all of that, actually. That brought to mind my mom, who I grew up, she has well, not to me anymore. She doesn't have a strong accent, but if you hear it for the first time, it's a strong accent. And I grew up hearing other people talk to her like she's an idiot because she has an accent. And she is a feisty lady. You can't tell her she can't do anything, just like you, Dr. Brown. She is true to herself, but I think that takes, it takes a lot of self-assurance, a lot of confidence. And like you said, Dr. Brown, it also helps a lot to have a team around you support that. Some people don't need that support, but we're all created differently, and that's the beauty in it all. So MSA Task Force is and MSA as a whole, just like Dr. Brown said, I don't think I'm reaching by saying that leadership wants to be that support for the students. I believe there are some questions or comments from the student attendees.
Yeah, I can ask one of those if you'd like.
Go ahead, Aubrey.
So one question is, what should a student do if an advisor or mentor engages in discriminatory behavior? Are there any practical steps?
So if I may, so one of the things to do is to look up the ombuds at your institution. Obviously, I can't speak for other institutions, but here at WashU, we have student-specific, staff-specific, and faculty-specific ombuds. The ombudsman is in general completely confidential. You know, nothing gets documented, nothing gets given to HR or anything like that. It's a completely safe and confidential space in which you can describe, you know, what happened and get their input and advice on, you know, how to handle a difficult situation. And so that's kind of my first stop for, you know, if someone I know who comes to me and says, I've had, you know, this really awful experience, you know, that's the first place to go. And I think most institutions have ombuds for both, you know, faculty, staff, and students.
So I'm curious, how does that work exactly? Let's say I submit a complaint anonymously. How does the response come if they don't know who's submitted the complaint? And then
so this would be pre-submitting a complaint. This is an incident occurred and you need to talk to someone. And the ombuds has an email address that's not university, at least that's how it is here. It's a Gmail address that only the ombuds controls. You can email them, you can set up a time to go meet with them, and it's a confidential discussion. There's, you know, certainly the ombuds here, they have to have a certain level of training in terms of confidentiality and sort of conflict resolution techniques. and what are the and enough information to help guide you into how to respond to the incident and what the right course of action for you, your personal situation would be. So this is submitting a complaint. Does that make sense?
I think so. I want to take it a bit further though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I get guidance on how to handle whatever situation whatever scenario happened.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any I hate to say reprimands, but whoever is guilty of the charge, what happens there? How do I get reassurance that I won't be I won't just get a pat on the head and say, okay, yeah, we're sorry, move along?
So that's a really good question, and I don't have a particularly satisfying answer. And I'll give you an example, and I'll redact names. But I have a female staff member, senior scientist in my lab. She's from Eastern Europe, came from the Balkans. She's absolutely phenomenal. I adore her. I'll just say that. And there was an incident where a senior faculty member from a different department, a clinical department, had submitted some samples for electron microscopy processing. We had processed the samples, and we're all microscopists, so if I tell you the axiom shit in, shit out, then you'll understand that we can't. There's no magic wand, right, that you can wave and make a bad sample look good under an electron microscope. It's just, and that was communicated very politely and respectfully that there were some sample challenges, and this is why the sample looks like this. And there was no response, right, to that email. I happened to be in a faculty council meeting, so I wasn't in the lab. This individual came down to the lab and literally got into my staff member's face, screaming, spittle flying, was incredibly aggressive. And one of my male staff members basically, very politely, but got in between and said, okay, no way, you have to stop. And then, as soon as this person left, texted me, I ran out of faculty council, came back to the lab, obviously to find, my other staff member in floods of tears over the whole incident. And I was absolutely outraged by this. And so, I immediately filed a complaint. I immediately, sent off emails to my 2 department chairs to say, this is not okay. People can't do this. I'm not going to stand for it. And, one of my chairs was great, contacted the chair of the other department, which was much bigger clinical department, and said, this is not okay. This needs to be addressed. And I felt super optimistic and enthusiastic about this. But here's where the unsatisfying thing comes. So the other department chair, sought out the badly behaving faculty member, essentially said, WTF, you can't, excuse my language, you can't do that. And then this individual basically lied and said, oh, it was a communication issue. She's foreign and she must have misunderstood me. And basically at that point, the other chair considered the matter closed. And when I asked my chair to follow up with them, they were basically told, oh, it seems like it was just a communication mishap. I think the matter's closed now. And, I went apoplectic at my chair and was, basically told, well, there's nothing really much else we can do. And so was there any, positive impact from this? No. Do I think that guy will do it again? Most likely. Am I ever going to let it happen on my watch again? No. But I think from a positive perspective, what the individual who this happened to in my group, you know, what she got from the incident was that, you know, whatever happens, right, you know, my boss, James, has my back and isn't going to stand for any BS. And to me, that's super important, right? I'm not going to let anyone that works with me be subjected to that kind of, and again, excuse my language, but I get riled up with this story, with that kind of bullshit.
Absolutely. I think if that were to happen to me, and I knew that at the very least my advisor had my back, I think that would be sufficient in the immediate. But
it's the long term, right? You know, this individual basically has behaved with impunity, and there's been no corrective action taken.
Exactly.
And at this point, like, me as another faculty member, I'm basically powerless to impact any positive change. And so, you know, all I can do at this point is like shed light on the incident and say this happened. And I bring it up actually with my chair regularly, that this happened and this was not a satisfactory resolution. And then there's usually some sort of mumbled response. But, you know, I brought it up in the last 3 years of my annual reviews, and I'm going to keep bringing up it in my annual reviews until I'm told to not bring it up anymore.
That's the way to do it. I think in this story, clearly only one side was told with complete disregard of the other.
Yeah.
But that just tells us that these issues need to be addressed at the very top,
Absolutely.
So,
and I think the only way it gets there, right, is if we, you know, we all make the commitment that, you know, we're not willing to stand for those things. And by virtue of that, that we make the commitment that we're going to be loud and we're going to shine a light on these dark places with these undesirable behaviors until there's change. And this change is not going to happen overnight, right? It just, as infuriating as that is to me, it's just not going to happen overnight. Have we come a long way, I think, particularly, you know, in academia compared to the 80s, and particularly in a medical school, right? I think we've come, you know, a long way. Is there a long way still to go? My God, yes. And while I still have a voice, right, I'm going to be loud about it and keep shining a light on things to make people understand that this sort of behavior is not okay.
Yeah, well said. Sai, I know you put a comment in there. I want to hear what your input is.
Yeah, I just thank you, Louisa. And I want to say first of all, I agree with a lot of things, everything that James has said and Treva has said. I just want to add, I've been in the US since 2005, starting as a graduate student on an F1 visa to now being a PI. And the difference has been that as a grad student, I was terrified of rocking the boat. I could, you know, get into a confrontation over anything with a professor teaching a class, drop 3 credits, and there goes my visa and my whole PhD, right? So it became default to ignore a lot of experiences. Is like, oh, this is just how it is, and deal with it, adapt to it. And now I'm able to see that from a different perspective and say, pull that on a student in my presence and we'll see what happens. Like confrontation, calling out bad behavior and not letting it go unacknowledged in silence is something that we could all do. But one thing we want to be mindful of is international students and just students in general might feel a lot more vulnerable speaking up. So individually, if we can make them aware that, hey, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to be in your corner, I think it can help.
Thank you for that. And I know that that's, as a student, that might be difficult to trust if a PI anywhere on campus is saying you can come to me. There's still that uncertainty of is it ever going to get back to my my advisor. But we'll come back to that. Aubrey, you said there are more questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one other question. Thank you for those who submitted them. So I'm taking a bit of liberty with this question. So we've all stood in front of, or most of us, I'm sure, have stood in front of posters at conferences before, and that's potentially a breeding ground for unfortunate interactions with folks, right? So is there any practical advice from the panelists for how to handle receiving discriminatory comments or actions in the moment?
So could you, I guess, elaborate a little bit on, I guess, the terms of discriminatory remarks?
Well, I could share with an unfortunate circumstance that I had one time. There's one time I was at my poster and I was asked a question that I couldn't understand, or that I couldn't answer from a, I assume a professor or somebody that was more advanced in years. And when I couldn't answer their question, I was basically patted on the forehead and said, "It's okay, sweetheart." In the moment, of course, I wanted to go off, but of course, that's not the way to handle that situation. I basically just froze, and I'm sure my face was cherry colored. But yeah, when you're in that moment, is there a good way to handle it?
You didn't get patted on the head, I hope, for real.
No, there was a pat. There was a pat and a sweetheart.
Deb, I'm gonna let you take that one. I'm not gonna comment on this. I'm gonna let you take that.
No, I can speak. Okay, I typically avoid as much as I can poster presentations, just because like I hate seeing the same thing over and over again. But I can speak to an analogous situation. You might be able to take away some messages from that. So giving seminars in front of other departments and having bullying PIs say negative things to you is kind of a similar thing, right? And I feel like bullies only respond to strength. So I can tell you about an interaction and how I handled it. Maybe it's not the best way to handle it, but this is how I did it. I was given a presentation in a department, and I was talking about how we isolate these proteins from breast cancer cells, and then we look at the proteins and cryo them, and we work on their structures, blah, blah, whatever I do. And I kept having another faculty in that department say, "Well, why don't you overexpress the protein in yeast instead and work on it that way as a recombinant protein?" You know, why should I do that when my whole paradigm of my research approach is authentically looking at these proteins from their source of tumors? Yeast don't get tumors. What the, you know, you want to say like WTF, why would I do that? And he wouldn't stop. And the way I shut him down, because he's kind of bullying me in front of this whole department, I said, "Well, I can appreciate that that's your research approach, but I'd like to do something more authentic. This is how I do my experiments, and you can manage them your way, and I'll manage mine my way, because I'm, you know, in charge of my own projects." Like, I had to say that. And then afterwards, I thought, okay, good. I stood up for myself. Everything was fine. He didn't ask me more questions. But then after that, someone, it may have been the department head or someone, says, "Oh, well, you don't want to talk to Deb Kelly because she's mean to people when she gives talks," or something like that. You know what? If that's the reputation I established, good, then I won't be bullied anymore. You know what I mean? And people know I'm not mean when I give talks, but like this guy, he wouldn't stop. And so I just had to stand up to him. And if that's how they would want to view me from then they know they can't pull that crap anymore. So as a student, it's a lot scarier though, right? And I don't have to worry about that, you know, post-tenure and everything. But a comparable thing to say would be like, well, these are established protocols that we've already published, and I invite you to read my papers on the work. You could say something like that. So you're elevating yourself without having to put this person down. And like Michelle Obama, we go high. I mean, when they go low, you just kind of want to step on them. But always go high. And if you need extra support, you know, you need a mentoring team, not just one mentor. It seems like James is a great mentor for his people, right? But you need a mentoring team. So find those PIs and colleagues, it could even be postdocs in your area where you work, and go to them as trusted allies if you feel safe with them. Now, maybe they'll have something actionable and maybe they'll say something is not actionable. Maybe you're reacting or you're having a bad day and just something strikes you. So, but at least then you kind of have that outside perspective of neutrality from your mentoring team to kind of help you make those best decisions. So if someone were to say those critiques and you already have some publications, be like, I appreciate your point of view. I invite you to read my papers on how we're doing this. And I hope you find it also enlightening. You know, always come from a position of strength to counter a bully, in my opinion. That's my perspective on it, though.
I think that's just an awesome perspective. And I really want to echo Deb's comment about a mentoring team. I make a habit of encouraging all of my people to, you know, build relationships, whether it be with different users of the center or other faculty that they can go and get different points of view and perspectives from. I mean, you really want to surround yourself with people that lift you up. I mean, certainly from my perspective, and, you know, I'm old and balding at this point, but I still, you know, try and surround myself with people that I can go talk to when I deal with negative people. And, you know, you want people that are not just going to like pat you on the head, excuse the comment, and, you know, say nice things. You want people that are going to be honest and, you know, open with you and give you different perspectives that are going to allow you to grow as an individual.
Yeah, and some people just get high on pushing other people's buttons or trying to show that they think they're intellectually superior. And those are ones, you know, that you know are actually very small inside. And don't fall for it, don't engage. Just always go high, share your papers, and just keep on moving and doing great work. As long as you believe in yourself and the work you're doing, good work will always get published and always get funded, in my opinion. You might have to work hard to get there, but I mean, science is hard. That's what it is. Nobody should be patting you on the head unless it's your stylist who's doing something to you. That is just like horrible, and like slap it down.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, I want to say that didn't happen at an M&M meeting. It was at a different conference. But looking ahead to M&M as a follow-up question, is there an outlet within MSA or the M&M conference to report circumstances that could occur at the meeting? I know we're virtual, so it's a little less likely, but it's still not impossible that something could happen.
Or hopefully by the time we're back in person, we'll have these things resolved. At least find a way to hear anonymous.
So Esther will probably be able to speak better to this than me, but it certainly came up at MSA Council, and I think this was pre your tenure, Deb, but there is a defined policy document that details you know, the processes in place for, you know, if there is an incident, what is the reporting, what information do we capture, and how do we address, as the society, how do we address you know, an inappropriate infraction, as it were. Esther, are you on? Okay, there you are.
But I can't unmute. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Yes, we have a new policy that's in place. We had a plan for posting signs during the meeting of whom you should contact and what the process is. And in the end, we decided to try de-escalation before. So once a person fills out a report, then there has to be follow-up. So I believe in the end, I'll have to look at the document to be absolutely sure, but I think in the end we decided the best thing to do would be to first talk to the person and then decide to actually fill out the documentation if everybody, if the person after the conversation felt like that needed to be done. But yes, you're right. We do need this even for a not in-person meeting, which had not occurred to me. So I will make sure that happens. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Thanks, Esther. Aubrey, if you don't have any other questions from students, I do have another scenario. I'm very, very, very curious to hear the panelists' input. This came from a friend of mine, and but I will redact the names involved. So the student, we'll call her Sally. So Sally is in a meeting with her advisor and another PI on campus that she's about to collaborate on a project with. And during this Zoom call, this is recent, so it's all through Zoom. During this Zoom call, anytime it's her turn to speak or whatever, anytime it's her turn to speak, she will address the question at hand, but this collaborator, instead of responding directly to her, will always respond to her advisor as if she's not there at all. And even though the topic or the question immediately is related to her directly, he completely dismisses and disregards her and never uses her first name, always referring to her when speaking to her advisor, of course, as she. So this is, I would say it's somewhat subtle. These are, I guess, what we would call microaggressions, but how would you advise a student to handle a situation like that, especially considering that her advisor may not have picked up on that behavior? And I won't call on anyone. I'll give you time to think. I'll let you speak up whenever you think you have a thought.
So, I mean, oh, sorry, Deb had her hand up.
I was just going to say, what one approach after it happens the first time is to speak with your advisor to empower you to answer the questions, and your advisor needs to step up and say, or the person's advisor needs to step up and say, that's an excellent question. Why don't we let Sally answer that? That's how I would handle it as a PI or as a student with the connection with the advisor. If the advisor refuses to do that, have that conversation again until they do it. If they still refuse to do it, fine, let your PI answer all the questions at your defense then too.
I guess I should add, there's always of course, there's always a power imbalance between the student and the advisor, and that relationship is built over the years. But let's say the student is in her first year and they haven't established that bond yet. I guess I imagine it would put her in a difficult position. Of course, she's not going to speak up to this collaborator, but maybe she's also afraid to voice her concern to her advisor because it's still a new relationship.
Yeah. Practicing with a friend as to what you would say to your advisor, the more you practice it, the better you get at saying something. But like, you might be very introverted or scared to speak up and think like, this is a big professor, I can't do that. You have to develop that skill and practice with someone what you would say, like over and over again until you get comfortable saying it, and just be tactful about it. But you got to at least connect with your advisor in a way that would make that manageable. In my opinion, perhaps James has something to offer. He's been in a situation like this before. I know he wanted to make a comment as well.
You literally said what I was going to say. So that's totally awesome. The comment I was really going to say, I'll just echo Deb's, is that, after the first time it happens, you have to summon up a bit of courage and talk to your PI. And then if I was the PI and I hadn't noticed it, which personally I think is shocking if no one notices that, but, if I hadn't, then I'd be like, oh my God, that's complete shit. I need to figure out a way to empower you. And then Deb outlined a perfect way to do that. If this individual is being a jerk and referring to an individual as she, which is like mind-numbingly rude, by the way, and incredibly discourteous. As Deb said, okay, that's a great question. Why don't we let Sally address that? Sally's best informed to address that question. And then if this person continues to be a jerk, then I mean, it's like, is this really someone that you want to interact with? I think is the kind of the bigger question.
Right.
And then, and if you don't want to, then I think, you know, you have to have a heart to heart with your PI and say, look, this is just not okay. I don't need to be, you know, demeaned and put in a situation where I'm deemed to be worthless. And if the PI is worth their salt, they would recognize that that's a toxic situation, and they need to take their student out of it and put them, you know, put them on a different collaboration or work on a different project where they don't have to interact with that individual. But as a PI, from my perspective, I wouldn't want to collaborate with someone like that doesn't, you know, respect people that work in my group. I mean, I just think that's rubbish.
I agree.
But maybe I'm super naive about these things.
Thank you both for that input. That was my immediate thought too, but I think I take too much after my mom. My first reaction is to fight back, but I can understand how that would be a really intimidating position to be in. Any other questions from the student attendees? Oh, I'm sorry, Gail. Did I lose her? Oh, there you are.
Here.
You're right in the middle of my screen. I looked everywhere else, but
that hand raising function,
yeah,
plays musical chairs with the.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to add in the eventual catastrophizing of this not so hypothetical situation, along with talking to your advisor, you may want to choose a mode of communication. Sally may want to choose a mode of communication that speaks to her strengths, no pun intended, whether, you know, talking in person or writing it down and sending it as in an email, you know, so then you get to, you know, in person may have, you know, that personal touch, the immediate response, etc. A written one may have can have the advantage of being able to plan out what you're saying. Not that you can't plan talking, but you know, if stuff persists, it may be good to continue in a mode of communication that is recordable in terms of documenting behaviors and incidents in a worst case scenario, just to have a record of things happening, so that it's not like, you know, oh, it's just one little thing. Well, no, it happened like 5 times last week, or, you know, 3 times last month or something. So that may be one thing to consider.
Thanks, Gail. I'm glad you said that, because when she and I had this conversation, my first thought was to give her PI the benefit of the doubt. For whatever reason, he didn't pick up on this, but my advice was to point it out to him, and then at the next meeting, see if maybe then he sees it as well for himself. And I think it's so much more impactful if you see that behavior firsthand and you don't just hear that it happened. But I appreciate all of your advice. We are coming to the end. We have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to end on a positive note. We had a question submitted by one of the registrants, and I thought it was just great. And the question is, do any of you, and I'd like to, since we're down to 14 people here, I'd like to hear from everyone, if you're okay with sharing. Do any of you have a story about an ally that stood up for you when you were facing discrimination? Or, you know, it doesn't have to be that you were facing discrimination. Is there anybody who really advocated for you and pushed you? Kind of similar to the story Juan told. I'll go first. So I know there's this notion that in science, you know, women among the other minorities are a minority. We're underrepresented in STEM. But I must say, I had a mentor years ago when I was working for this small startup company, and he was a retired pathologist, and Jerry Nuovo, if you guys are curious about him. He's brilliant, and he really, when other professors said that, you know, my grades didn't really, and they didn't, they were terrible grades, but Jerry appreciated my curiosity, and he really was, I mean, he was huge in getting me back to school, to graduate school. And then now my advisor is here, so I'm going to talk him up a little bit. I would be if he weren't here anyway. But you know, just to say that I've had men in my life support me and encourage me when others didn't. So just to say that it takes all of us. It takes not just those in underrepresented groups to speak for themselves. It takes those in power to speak for us as well. And I've been really fortunate to have that. So I will just go around my squares here. James, you're right next to me. So you can either speak to how someone helped you, how you've helped someone, or how you've teamed up to advocate for anybody.
So I'll avoid being negative, but I actually haven't had a situation in my career when I've experienced a negative situation where someone stuck up for me. And, you know, I view that as negative at the time, but positive in the sense that it really shaped, you know, my viewpoint. And, you know, it's sort of given me the drive to, you know, and the courage actually to, you know, stand up against shitty situations and highlight where there's injustice. You know, what I've tried to do, at least with my own group, you know, when there have been negative things happen, and thankfully, you know, I can count on one hand over 6 years the number of negative instances, which when you work with over 400 research groups, right, the possibility that you're going to end up working with a jerk is pretty high. So thankfully, we haven't had very many negative things. I told you one story on what I did, and you know, there've been a couple of other instances that are similar. And each time I've tried to, first and foremost, you know, sit down with the individual who was affected and just listen, and have them talk and have them, you know, just get everything off their chest, right? I mean, it's really important. Like if you internalize, you know, these negative experiences, right, they're going to have a really negative effect on your mental health. And, you know, one of the things I'd say that I do advocate for, and if anyone is unfortunate enough to see my Twitter feed, you'll see that I'm always posting about mental health, and we need to, you know, help our students and advocate for better mental health services, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and the social isolation that's come from that. And so, you know, I mean, these are things that I care about, I'm passionate about, and, you know, however I can increase visibility to these things, then, you know, that's what I'm going to try and do. And I think sort of the biggest guiding principle I try and operate by is just not be a jerk. And I don't know if I succeed at that, but I really do try.
Thank you. Juan, you're next.
So I wanted to maybe share another story, and it was just about coming into graduate school as a little bit older student, having spent some time away from school for a while. And so I came to graduate school with 2 little kids, and being a minority student, first of all, and then having a family and that responsibility was a little bit nerve-wracking coming back to school, to try to take on, you know, this big goal. especially when I was rotating through labs and kind of talking to professors. I had talked to other people like, should I bring up the fact that I have a family? Should I, what is your advice, this and that? And people gave me all different types of advice. But at the end of the day, I thought to myself that, I'm not ashamed of my family. I'm not ashamed of my kids. They're what drive me to be better and to strive for more. And so when I was rotating, when I was talking to different professors about rotating in their labs, I got a few different responses about like, some people said, they were early in their career, like, oh, I don't have a family. I kind of expect people to be here when they, for long hours, I guess is kind of what I took away from the conversation. But when I talked to Liz, Liz Wright, she was incredibly accepting of, she told me, there's plenty to do from home, right? There's plenty of reading to do if you have to be out of here at a certain time some days, things like that. And kind of just having those conversations. I tell, other students that come into different programs, just you want to be who you are in the lab that you're going to join. You don't want to be, I can't imagine going 5 years trying to be someone you're not, however long you're going to be in grad school. So trying to, the research is going to be great. And I'm sure there's tons of different projects to join in on, but being who you are and being comfortable in that lab, being who you are, I think is one of the most important things.
Thanks, Juan. Treva?
Okay, so I'm gonna try to hold my comment down to a minimum, but I'm piggybacking off of everybody that I just heard. So first of all, Sai, I think that's how you say your name, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, but I don't even know you. I heard so much about you, so you must be doing an amazing job. You're being an amazing role model to Louisa, and you are awesome for that. So secondly, those are the kind of mentors that you definitely need. So kind of piggybacking off of one here too. I don't have little ones. I probably still act like a little one myself sometimes. So it's probably best that I don't have little ones. But family is really big to me because I am an only child. So my parents are super important to me, especially since they are older. So that's one of the things that I went into like my undergrad research and my graduate research saying that, look, this is what's important to me. What do you expect of me? Because if you can't work with me, having to go home to my family and this, that, and the other ain't gonna work. So transparency is important, but I digress. So for me, two scenarios. I'm going to give one about myself being in that position, advocating for someone else, and another about somebody else advocating for me. And so I am a big fan of giving the quote unquote underdogs a chance. So I actually just told this story yesterday when I was looking for summer interns. I got all of these applications on my desk with like these 4.0 students, and like in their reference letters, it was like, oh, my mom and dad are like these amazing archaeologists and this, that, and other, which nothing is wrong with that at all. It is super amazing. But at the end of the day, it's like, what kind of personality can you offer? What is your work ethic? Do you expect things to be handed to you? Because I'm not about to hand you anything. So where I advocated, I was like, well, first of all, we are not into HBC. Why are we only reaching to the Louisiana Arts and Science and Math and whatever else prestigious name they have, and Mississippi Arts and Science, Math, and everything else prestigious behind it? Why aren't we reaching into like our public high school? Me being me, but I'm bold like that. I reached out myself. I reached into like the little known or public or I don't know, BC schools, however that works. Again, I don't have little ones, I don't know how that works. And I personally reached out to them because I'm like, I want your students because they are not being even looked at, which is crazy, right? So I reached into HBCU and into a high school that was little known of. So these two students, one had like a 2-point something GPA and the other one, she was amazing. She just came from HBCU. So, you know, my colleagues are like, why would you want that? And you got this person, that person, all these applications on your desk. And I was like, and so also I left out too, I did talk to these students personally on the phone because I'm all about personalities and things like that. And they were just so, for lack of a better term, square. So I was like, these people have personality, they had the work ethic, but you never know what, you know, I guess background things that they might be dealing with. They might be dealing with having to work a job while they're in high school, having to do X, Y, Z, you don't know. And you don't know this without talking to the person. So making this long story short, chose those two candidates and they were super amazing, but what they dealt with was being the only one. So only high school student, only African-American student. And they're like, well, Dr. Brown, why? And I'm like, well, I reached out and advocated for you. Now we have to make this a trend for other people, other, you know, sciences, other PIs, whomever, to follow that trend because they can't get what's not offered. So that's a whole nother story for a different day. Now on to the story where someone advocated for me. And I told this story to my DEI task force. I had some technicians come in and they were working on the microscopes. And this one guy, he was just like, he just had this attitude and, you know, just like Louisa, I was like, okay, I'm gonna hold it in because I want to snap, but I didn't. So this guy, he's sitting, now mind you, I work at a government institution and he's like sitting there with his arms crossed with this attitude, like, why you just sitting in here? I'm like, the last time I looked, my name is on the door of this lab. And before I could finish, my colleague walks in, white male, and he's like, is there a problem? And I just look, and long story short again, by the time he was done telling this man about himself, I was like, because normally it would just be a position where I'm fighting for myself. And you know, you get tired of fighting. And so for someone to step in on my behalf and be like, you need to treat her with the same respect that you would treat the person that you used to deal with, that says a lot about your work environment and the people that basically hired you on. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Treva. Sai?
Yeah, I just want to quickly add, clearly I got to live up to whatever you've said about me, Louisa, but for everybody out there, you know, don't hold back, just unabashedly be yourself. And, you know, going home and like spending time, it's not just for people with kids and families. I would go home in grad school because Meshuggah had a new album out and I was going to go listen to it all evening. Perfectly valid reason in my book. As long as the science is getting done, who cares when you do it, right? And do it your way, because that's really the point of science. Like we each approach problems differently, and that's the point of diversity. It's not just to let somebody else kind of regress to the mean, but to do what they, you know, would do as their science.
Thanks, Sai. Well said. And much appreciated. Gail?
Springboarding from Sai's comment, I want to say, definitely, the whole be who you are, this sounds sacrilegious, but go outside the lab and figure out who you are. You know, the my graduate school days, that's when I got to be on the college quiz bowl team. That's when I got to be to have a half-hour radio show on the college station. That's when that's why I started going to some conferences, but that's when I was introduced to the local LGBTQ nonprofit community through people that I knew through work and their efforts outside. While you're still in college, please take advantage of those opportunities that are in your community that your institution offers, to meet new people, to explore. I really strongly advocate for that.
Thanks, Gail. That's great advice. And talking to other students, I appreciate that that's really underrated, having a life outside of the lab. Deb, you're up.
Cool. So I'll just give a quick note of how I think I accidentally empowered some students. I teach this class every spring. The name of the class is called So You Think You Can Write, and it's to teach students how to write manuscripts and fellowship applications based on the data that they're collecting in the lab. And like this year, like we're all shut down, we're doing virtual anyway. And so during the class, everyone has to pull up and share their screen and go through their writing, and we all talk about it as a group and that sort of thing. And to start off, the students are really shy to do that. They're really, really scared. And it always takes a task to open them up. And so this year, and it's usually a lot of international students who really want extra work with their help with their writing and to progress. And so this year I just told them as a start, write an abstract like you would for a paper, but about how COVID has affected you, right? Just to kind of get them talking in our first class. The thoughts and sadness that came out of these students, a lot of them from China or other Asian countries. And in America, we all know this violence against AAPI students right now. And so just the sadness that emerged from them. It was kind of like, I won't say healing, but kind of like a good cathartic exercise for them to kind of just open up and share who they are. And after that, they weren't scared to share their writing and the critiques from others in the class. They were more willing to share their screen and get started. I would still have to call on them at times, but I think it's a really good exercise to show them that they can connect with others. And they were all feeling so lonely. So they also used the class. They would start making coffee and come to the class like a writing workshop. It gave them a little bit of a sense of a community that they were missing and lacking. They're like, I just came to America. I thought I'd get this PhD. It was really awesome. And now I can't leave my room. I'm isolated. And then I walk outside, everyone hates me because I'm Asian. And I don't dare take my mask down because somebody's going to yell at me because I'm Asian. You know, I would hear all this kind of thing. People were like, I don't even know how to use my Face ID on my iPhone because I have a mask on. You know, like these little things you don't even think about. So like by the end of the class, I think everyone had kind of connected with their cohort, even though they couldn't actually see them a lot in person. As things are easing up, I see them talking to the halls and connecting with each other. And I really glad to see that those connections are being formed as they're going to go through grad school together. So strangely enough, this writing class helped kind of empower some students and give them that connectivity and community when they were first isolated here in the US. And that made me feel like a good mentor and a good teacher. And I'm not really known to be a great teacher as much as I am a pretty decent researcher. So I felt really great about that experience.
That's so awesome, Deb. And I imagine it also helps any of the Americans in this class, because I mean, even for me, I still, all of my family is still overseas in Algeria. And when you go to Algeria, I like to tell people it's like going back in time from the US. So it's only when I go there that I realize how relatively easy we have it here, and it's difficult to think about the additional challenges international students have. They're in a country, going to school, taking the same difficult classes we are in a second or third language, and that just seems.
And they have to write papers in that non-native
exactly
language. And
it's hard enough in your native language.
And they're excluded from certain American fellowships for applying to that their classmates had the privilege of applying to.
Exactly.
You know, and you have to find other international opportunities. But like anything to make our international students right now feel a bit more at ease, I'm really in favor of. Even as a society in MSA, we need to be mindful of that, I think.
I agree. Does anyone else want to share before we sign off? I know we are over time a few minutes. No? Okay. I appreciate you all for hanging in there. We wanted to extend it to an hour and a half. Typically our student council hosted webinars are an hour, but we knew that this conversation would last way longer than that. So thank you all for staying. I hope you've learned a little something. I certainly have. And I think that at least the task force has taken away some helpful insight to keep us moving along. So that's it. If anyone has any questions or comments or anything, I'll hang around for a few more minutes. Otherwise, thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.